News 98 WLDN. I'm Jason Wilder, and I'm your host today on The Breakfast Beat. I'm going to be joined on the phone by Michael Shank, and we're going to talk with Michael a little bit about, an article that he wrote, an op-ed piece for the New York Times called Get the Military Off of Main Street. But first off, Michael, thanks for joining us on the show today.
Thanks for having me on the show, Jason.
Well, a very interesting piece. You wrote a lot of different opinion stuff. Basically, I think the thing that spurred your article, well, what's going on in Ferguson, Missouri? Tell us a little bit, actually, about what exactly did spur the article. What pushed you to write this?
Great question. A couple things. All the way back to Seattle WTO protests when I was on the streets and was hit by tear gas and rubber canisters and rubber bullets, all the way to Occupy protest response by police across the country using armored personnel carriers, tanks, Humvees, mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles. And then, of course, more recently in Ferguson, we're seeing the same tactics used on protesters. We've been covering this issue at the Friends Committee on National Legislation for the last year. Last fall, I wrote a piece for The Guardian. I also wrote a piece for Reuters. And then early this year, we started working with Congressman Hank Johnson in his office, and we wrote a piece for USA Today in March, drawing attention to two programs. One is through the Department of Defense, which gives free military equipment from the war zone to U.S. police. The other is within the Department of Homeland Security, where they give terrorism grants to police forces in America. $34 billion has been given out since 2001, where they can buy these tanks, assault weapons, armored drones, grenade launchers, MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles. So it's been a problem that we've been monitoring for some time. Ferguson appears to be, for unfortunate circumstances, a tipping point in public awareness about this issue and resistance to having our main streets turned into kind of war zones or at least witnessing military equipment used on protesters.
Well, it certainly has become a big flashpoint in the country for a lot of things. We're going to kind of avoid some of the political ramifications. We're going to avoid the racial stuff because our chat today is going to take, I think, enough time anyway, talking about militarized police forces. When you're talking a town the size of Ferguson, Missouri, which has just over 21,000 people in population, a majority of which are African Americans in the community, but what does a police force that size need military-grade equipment for?
It's a great question. If you look at these MRAPs that are coming back, mine-resistant, so they're resistant to mines and they're protected from ambush, two things that we haven't seen yet in the U.S. and hopefully we'll never see, but you're seeing very small towns get these, including Roanoke Rapids in North Carolina, getting a MRAP, and they're a town of 16,000. So we're seeing assault weapons, armored vehicles go to towns that haven't before needed it simply because it's free. All the police chief has to do is go online, fill out a form. It's pretty simple. Then they check the Pentagon's inventory, see what's free. They get it without any prior training needed or a needs assessment. So you've got small towns in Georgia with no bodies of water nearby getting boats and scuba gear. You're getting assault weapons shipped to police chiefs and county sheriffs that then end up selling them on eBay, passing them along to friends. This is stuff we've documented, and there's very little oversight on behalf of the Pentagon, no state in-person inspection. And so the bill that we're working on with Congressman Johnson, who's going to introduce this in September, would provide a whole new level of accountability, monitoring, and oversight so that people aren't selling their weapons on eBay or giving them to friends, but also to prohibit the military-grade equipment specifically from coming back to America.
Now, what kind of percentage, how many police forces would you say are leaving themselves open to these types of abuses, selling, giving away, that type of thing?
We're seeing it in almost every state. We're getting accounts in every state of armored vehicles, assault weapons coming to U.S. police. Almost 100,000 machine guns have been passed along from the war zone to U.S. police, roughly 1,000 armored vehicles. But the Pentagon's got 20,000 MRAPs that it can give away. So unless we stop it now, we're going to just see more and more MRAPs come. But we're seeing it from the East Coast to the West Coast, from small town to big town. And unfortunately, it's becoming much more pervasive and ubiquitous.
Now, do you think it's a sign that the federal government is becoming more afraid of its own population? I mean, you've got handing out to police forces now, where before they never would have thought of doing something like that.
Yeah, you're right. And over the years, from Vietnam on, and even when Martin Luther King was assassinated, we saw tanks running through New York. So we've seen it before. This is a whole new level. The gates have opened wide, in part because we've got some really heavy equipment from two major wars, and rather than recycling it, which the Pentagon can do and which we've encouraged them to do, they're passing it along. If we head in the direction of seeing American protest and the public as the adversary in an antagonistic position, it becomes very problematic for any kind of crowd control. It's only going to escalate. Former Seattle Police Chief Norm Stamper, who ran the WTO response, has come out against this militarization, as have many other folks. Even Bradley Balco is talking about the SWATification of federal agencies when they issue warrants. We're looking at 150 SWAT raids a day just to issue a simple warrant for the Department of Education, for example. So if we head in that direction, it absolutely compromises free speech and sets up a very antagonistic relationship with the community.
Michael Shank is my guest this morning, and he wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times, Get the Military Off of Main Street. Michael, another question is, how much do you think it contributes to the police actually using this military equipment? I mean, against civilians. By that I mean, do you think they use it just because they have it, but don't really need to use it?
Well, that's the thing. You've got police that haven't been trained in crowd control. You've got police that haven't been trained in what happened in Ferguson. I mean, that surprised a lot of police there, I'm sure. They haven't sufficient training. They get scared, naturally, by a crowd that could turn violent, and so they pull out the gear that they have, and again, they haven't been trained in using that gear, whether it's grenade launchers or armored drones or even these MRAPs and tanks and Humvees. So we have real concern about insufficient training and actual need, but it's antithetical to what is working that Attorney General Eric Holder has talked about in terms of community-oriented policing. That goes back to Clinton days and Joe Brand's work with community-oriented policing. If the population feels represented by the police force, and that gets into some of the race issues that we won't necessarily talk about on this show, but if the people feel unrepresented either in terms of color or in terms of equipment being so far afield from what they think they are. You know, if you had an armored tank roll down your street, how would you respond? I would probably be ducking in my basement or out in the street protesting. That is far afield from the benefits of a more integrated, representative, community-oriented police force that actually does better with intel and prevention than any kind of MRAP response would provide.
All right. Well, once again, Michael Shank has been my guest. Again, he wrote the op-ed piece for the Times, Get the Military Off of Main Street. You could probably find it online. Michael, thanks for joining us today. A very interesting topic.
Thanks for having me, Jason.